Welcome to everybody. We're glad that you're able to join us and tune in for another Equipment Zone webinar. Today, I'm glad, happy, grateful to be able to present to you some information. But really, it's not me. It's going to be Roy Huseman, one of our lead trainers, because the topic is all about Garment Creator. He is going to dive deep and be able to share extensive knowledge today about Garment Creator. And today's emphasis will be on light garments and white garments. So I'm excited to hear the rest of this story. Roy's prepared a bunch of slides for us, and I'm going to turn it over to him now. Roy, thanks again for joining us.
All right, thank you. And thank everyone for attending today. This shouldn't be too long, but we will cover everything that we need to cover in Garment Creator, and I do have some slides as Jay mentioned. So we'll start out with just some basic image on here, dark type, whether it's black, red, green, or any of the colors that you may be able to go on a darker shirt than what you would normally consider a light garment, like getting into a darker gray. If you are running just strictly black type, you can get that to print darker to show up well on those style garments. Otherwise, you're going to end up going with a white base and going in a dark color mode. So that's not what we're going to be covering today. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that in case anybody was wondering. As far as your light colored settings here, we're going to just start out and talk about the basic settings and kind of cover what's actually happening in the background to help you understand. On your print quality levels, you do have a total of 4. 1 for speed, 2 is the standard default, 3, and then there's 4 for quality. 3 is also generally a quality mode as well, just keeping that in mind. So we'll start out with 1 and just tell you the difference between what's going on here. So 1 is going to, if you take a circle like you're going to color, and you're going to do how many strokes of either crayon or ink in that circle to make that circle appear. Here it's going to use a 720 by 360 droplet of ink, and it's going to drop it 2 times as the head passes both directions. If I go up to the level 2, it's going to use a slightly smaller droplet, which is 720 by 720. The bigger the number, the smaller the droplet of ink. And then it's going to do 4 passes, so it's going to drop 4 droplets of ink. Each time I do a pass or add passes, it's adding time as well as adding ink, just so you're kind of aware and know what's happening in the background. If I go to level 3, I am going to 1440, 720, and I'm going to do 8 passes or 8 droplets of ink to create that same spot size. And in quality level 4, it's still the same droplet size as quality level 3, but I'm going to do 16 passes, which takes a lot longer. This takes 4 times as long to print as level 2. And level 3 takes twice as long to print as level 2. So keeping in mind when you're using Garment Creator, go ahead and click on the underlined blue area to the left so you can better see that you do have other options available. And these options can help us today in trying to get a better, darker image, whether we're pre-treating or not. And typically most people, when they're printing on light garments, a lot of them don't pre-treat or don't even have pre-treat available. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody is aware that you can buy pre-treat if you need to, and add that to the shirt prior to printing, just like on the dark garments. We do sell a light not concentrate, but ready to use pre-treat, the Image Armor Light that you can use. And I did have some sample slides that we'll be talking about, and some were pre-treated and some were not. So basically, Depending on what my settings are here and what I end up doing down here, unidirectional or bidirectional is basically whether I'm going to print on a completely flat surface using the faster speed where it's printing in both directions versus one direction. And then you have the print options down here below, which are the items that we're going to be talking about today. Doing a double strike, if I click on that, what that's going to do is it will print my normal level 2, and then I can issue a pause in here if I'd like to, like 30 seconds. And when I do that, what that'll do is that'll print that level 2. And when I don't pre-treat a shirt, there's going to be blotting involved. So that ink's going to hit the top of the fabric, and as it penetrates down into the fibers, if you were to do a cross cut of the shirt, it's going to expand almost like an iceberg. So you have your iceberg that's above the water is much smaller than what's below. So as it's going underneath the fabric and expanding, some of the fibers that are around the part over the expansion are going to give the illusion of it being lighter, especially after you wash the garment. And that's going to be something we'll look at today as well, is after the garment's washed, it's going to lighten up quite a bit on the unpretreated shirt. So we got to anticipate that when we're printing them and make sure that we're printing with more ink. And that's part of what we're trying to get across today in this lesson. And then Inkblot Reduction, what that's going to do for me is allow me to use my ink or my yellow ink to to start drying on the fabric to create an area where the blotting is going to be minimized because the first layer of ink has already started to dry. And when I do the double strike, that's also going to happen if I use a pause when I do it. So keep that in mind. You can run a double strike without a pause or run it with a pause. It really depends on what's happening. If you find, if you're looking at what's on the screen, where you're getting some of the edge of this black type where it's starting to expand into the fabric and make little lines or distortion marks, then obviously you want to put a pause in between adding that second layer of ink to keep that from happening or to minimize it. Or use Inkblot Reduction if you need to. And I would use Inkblot Reduction more in a case where I'm doing a picture that has a lot of detail. And we'll show you what that looks like as well. Media profile, generally everybody leaves that on default unless you know how to create ICC profiles. Obviously you have your pause here, and then you have your ink density where you can add color. And typically if I'm not pre-treating a garment, I am going to either add color or I'm going to do Inkblot Reduction and add color, or do a double strike. Okay, so keep that in mind as well. As well as also, if I'm doing something with finer detail, I would probably use a level 3 versus a level 2. It's going to increase my print time, but still I'm going to end up with a better result and a sharper, crisper image. And then down below here, we have our customized settings that are available. These are similar to what you see in a TV, where you have your brightness, contrast, saturation, red, green, blue levels. Epson was kind enough to give some just basic defaults, which if I click on these, if you look at the screen to the left, you can see what happens. It makes the colors darker, more vibrant as you're down in the lower numbers, and also makes a black print darker when it does that. So you could see the red really got darker. My dark green almost became a dark green, I guess you could say. And then I have my black, which it's not really visible, but when you print it, you will see that it will come out darker. And as I go up to level 2, the green is the biggest item here that's going to be changing. You can see that change there as I start going up, which typically between a 2 and a 3 is where I'd want to stay. if I'm running anything with a red, typically if I don't put enough ink or change the color of my red, by the time I don't pre-treat a shirt, I wash the shirt, the red lightens up tremendously. It almost looks like an orange or a lighter orange. So, and I do have a sample of that as well to show you. So basically when I'm doing type, I tend to possibly use these numbers depending on what colors I'm working with, just to kind of give you an example. And also some of the colors in some of the images that you're working with. This isn't something that you're going to use all the time, but like I said, if I am not pre-treating a shirt, I'm definitely adding ink or I'm doing a double stripe, depending on what the image is that we're working with. So let me share my screen to kind of go through the images that we have here, so you can get a better idea. So here is some geckos. The one thing I'd like to point out here is these images were reduced. So you're going to see a little bit of distortion in the logos that we have here, but the actual images of the lizards are printing fine. So nothing to worry about there. If you see some of the stuff look like it's closing in, it's because we shrunk it down too small. So the first one is a pre-treated level 2, which is standard, and this is before washing. All these images, until I let you know, will be before washing. The next one's unpretreated. So you can't really see too much here, but on the right-hand side, some of the ink tends to spread out a little bit more. I think it's more apparent on the black and yellow gecko. If you look at the black, you can clearly see that it seems to cover more area on the right than it does on the left. And then as far as the green one down below, has a little bit more dark contrast down here on the side of the belly. It's not as sharp of an image as it is on the left. And the one on the top, can't really see too much of a difference in comparison to the other two. Now, the next one is going to be pre-treated level 3 versus unpretreated level 3, keeping in mind again that we're adding more ink. We got 8 passes versus the 4 passes, smaller droplets of ink, but you can definitely see the yellow and black gecko on the right. The ink is expanding a lot more. So as long as the images can withstand this type of change, then it's okay to go ahead and print this way. Now, Inkblot Reduction, that setting in there, what that does is lay down my yellow first, again, so it can start to dry and make a barrier for the other colors not to blot as much. And we'll see an example of that in a moment. So now we have pre-treated level 3 using the striking that we mentioned, which were the color changes down at the bottom. You can see that the colors are much more vibrant. If you look at the gecko on the top with the purple and the orange spots in comparison to the one above on how light it looks up here versus the one down here. And the one to the right, we're still showing the same thing. As far as the color, still looks good. The yellow and black gecko and blue apparently show a lot of ink blotting going on there in comparison to the other ones. And this kind of gives you an up-close visual of where you even see some of the black protruding into the yellow. Now here's what Inkblot Reduction does. It actually lays my yellow ink down first, lets that, as I said, start to dry, because I would put a pause when I do that for about 30 seconds to let that ink start hardening on the fabric and keeping the other colors from penetrating into that color and going more into the fabric as far as blotting. So you can clearly see on this one The black isn't spreading quite as much as it did above. If you want to take a snapshot and think about that for a second compared to this one right here up on the right. It's still a little bit more than the one on the left that was pre-treated, but it's kind of a happy medium. Again, pre-treating costs a little bit of money, and if you're trying to save a little bit of time, or you don't have pre-treat and you want to print on a light garment, then you can go ahead and go through this process. So on here, we're using the Inkblot Reduction. That's what the IR or VR is. The level 2, we're adding 100% to our color, and then we're doing the striking of 2 to get that darker contrast. You can see that that print looks fairly nice. And then here's another example of Inkblot Reduction that kind of clearly gives more of a better view of what's happening. So the one on the left was printed normally, and if you look around the mouth, you can clearly see the black bleeding into the yellow ink up above. And also in the red tongue, you can see it around basically all sides. The other thing is the nose. The lines aren't as sharp and pronounced, and the eyes as well, as far as the outer perimeter of the white area. If you look at the one on the right, you can see that it's not blotting almost at all. If you tend to still see a little bit of blotting, you can always add a little bit more time. This one has 30 seconds of pause between the yellow and the colors, but you can clearly see that the line around the nose is much sharper, as well as the actual yellow. The contrast of the yellow looks a lot cleaner on the right. It almost has a little bit of an orangey look on the left because the magenta actually blotted a little bit into the yellow as it was starting to set up. It gave that little bit of a dirtier look as far as the yellow goes. So typically when you're running black and yellows, large images, without pre-treat, you are almost forced to use Inkblot Reduction. Just keep that in mind. So you'd be reverting back to that setting to use that to make sure you're not getting any of the bleeding occurring. And then here's an example of dark type, pre-treated versus unpre-treated. This is giving you an example. Doesn't look that much different right here. It's a little bit lighter. Actually, the camera doesn't show it as noticeably as it does by the eye. But once you cure it and wash it for the first time, it lightens up a lot, which I'll show you some samples of in a moment. So when you're not pre-treating, you definitely need to just keep in mind what your end result's going to be, and that you have to automatically add ink to compensate for that lightening that's going to occur after curing and washing for the first time. And then you have a pre-treated level 3 versus an unpre-treated level 3. We have a pre-treated level 2 where we're using the striking of 2, and it makes that green almost a, I guess it would be a dark green or forest green. Same on the level 3 that is pre-treated. And then we have unpre-treated here, 30-second pause, level 2, double strike. And then we have this one is a unpre-treated, pause of 30 seconds, level 3. Looks like the same image. My apologies on that. And then lastly, there is a unpre-treated, pause of 30 seconds, level 2, using Inkblot Reduction, adding 100% more color and a striking of 3, which gives you that green. It looks a little darker here after you take a picture of it than it actually looked on the shirt, just an FYI. So we're going to see this image actually after it's been washed. These are some examples. So this was an unpre-treated double strike. You could see on the left here. The green actually looks fairly good. The red is still dark. The black is dark. But on the right-hand side, I know that green still looks somewhat like a forest green, which is fine. And the black looks okay, but the red actually lightened up tremendously and almost took on an orange type color there. So keeping that in mind again is if you're running reds, you definitely want to accentuate that red by using striking in a lot of cases. And then here's another example as well, using just the standard level 2 unpretreated versus the unpretreated level 3. So you could see that level 3 unpretreated, just right straight setting, gives it a much better, cleaner look than the one on the left. And I guess at this point, Jay, I'd like to open it up to any questions that they may have.
We did get a couple of questions. You might have to show one or two more samples, so I won't jump in on video. But the first question had to do with F2000 settings. And someone asked, what about the F2000? Are they the same or they're different? Obviously, I know they're different, but
yes, they are different, and I'll go ahead and share my screen again on that. So if we look at the levels here, we have 4 levels on the 2100. The default level 2 is 720 by 724 passes. If I go to the F2000 controls and go back to my light shirt, I only have 2 levels. So basically, level 1 is the same as level 3 on the F2100, which should be your starting point for using the settings that we just discussed. So I would automatically just do a level 3, and that's why I showed level 2 and level 3 as far as samples go anyway.
So
and then
are there more options then with the F2100 settings? Has Garment Creator evolved and there are actually a few more settings or more options?
Basically on the light garment, the only difference between the 2000 and 2100 is your default setting. So level 1 is the same as level 3. Level 2 is the same as level 4 on the 2100. As far as unidirectional, bidirectional, double strike, inkblot reduction, pause, adding color, and using these color settings down below if you'd like to, they're all the same between the 2 machines. So again, the only difference is the actual level here at the top on the droplets of ink and the size of the droplets and how many passes it's going to take to print.
Got it. Here's another question. Roy, another guy had chimed in and said, do unpretreated shirts tend to fade more?
The answer to that would be yes.
Okay.
Because the ink is saturating into the fabric, and I gave the example of an iceberg. So if you imagine the ink that it's upstain on the level or surface level of the fabric is going to be visual. The one that expands and goes underneath is not going to be as visual. So when you wash the shirt, the fibers that are covering the part that expanded are giving you the illusion of a lighter image. The ink is actually not washing completely out. It's the ink or the fibers are clean on the area between those colored fibers, and it's giving the appearance of it being much lighter. So it almost gives that faded look.
Yeah, that's what I've seen in the past. Yep, no, it totally does. That's a good explanation. Here's another one. This sounds like somebody had an uh-oh moment where they said, I delivered some light blue shirts that I had pre-treated with Epson pretreatment, and the client said that the images washed out.
Okay.
So I know that when he says washed out, it probably wasn't completely washed out, meaning all of the ink was gone. But we've all been there when we've had that mistake, and in that moment, you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah, what we've done a lot of testing. There's a lot of discussions out there still going on with Pretreat. But I find that the light color Pretreats, the ones that are designed to use with the light colors, which is the yellow, magenta, cyan, and black, even though they're not really considered light colors, but it's not putting the white base down. That's the difference between the two. The makeup of the white ink is different, and the pre-treats that bond the white ink to the fabric are different than the ones that bond the inks to the fabric.
Okay.
So if you're using an Epson, and typically I know on their mixtures, they say to mix it like 3-to-1, 4-to-1, like 3 parts water, 4 parts water for light garment printing. I think the chemical makeup is not enough to bond the light colored ink. And in actuality, I think what is really happening, as the customer mentioned, in reality is a lot of that ink is being lost because it's not allowing it to saturate into the fabric. It creates a barrier on the surface to bond the ink to the fabric.
Yep.
And that barrier starts to break down, and it's not holding the ink. So some of the ink literally washes out of the shirt.
Gotcha.
When you're not pre-treating, that ink isn't washing out as much. Most of it's there. It's the fibers that are giving the illusion that it looks washed out. So
yep, that totally makes sense.
yeah, so I recommend using a light colored pre-treat only.
Okay.
The ones that we sell is Image Armor Light. I know there's Firebird. They have a light pre-treat. There's a couple other manufacturers. I would tend to say if anybody says they have a universal pre-treat, do some testing. Make sure you wash them yourself. And I always tell people when it comes to light garments and you're not pre-treating, wash them. Get used to doing the same type of tests I just showed you that I did. You can come back and watch this video again and kind of see what the settings are. And that way you have the ability to kind of see firsthand really what's happening. And then you'll get a better idea of how to handle your artwork as it comes in the door, and use your judgment call or your best judgment on, you know, which way you want to go.
Perfect. No, I think that's a critical point that you bring up about setting an expectation even with a client. Clearly, if it's a very important order, very large order, you want to test and you want to do the testing all the way through on the wash cycle so that they can see, you know, they can see what those final prints are actually going to look like. So good points on you. Here's another question. I think that just for clarity purposes, somebody has brought this up about if they want to try to keep it to a process that's simple and consistent, would it just be easier to pre-treat? It sounds like they might have teenagers in the back printing or workers that are just kind of showing up, punching the clock, load a shirt, push the blue button, and go about their day. So is it easier in terms of a system or a process, Roy, to keep it simple, to keep it consistent? Would you suggest just go ahead and pre-treat?
I would say it's up to the customer and their preference. I mean, if they want to have more of a manufacturing setup where there's, you know, no thought involved and they can put anybody back there and just throw a shirt on and go, then I would venture to say that would probably be the best thing to do, is to just pre-treat all the garments rather than having waste, because that'll occur if you don't have experienced help back there. So
yeah, okay. But the flip side of that coin, Roy, would be if you do want to be able to possibly save a step, possibly save a few cents, then watching this video and listening to your training and being able to troubleshoot is gonna have a huge payoff too. You'll have all those settings and scenarios figured out, right?
that would be correct, yes. I would recommend, you know, on the smaller setups or, you know, mom and pop types of shops where, you know, every penny counts. And I always tell people, don't look at actually trying to save money on buying the cheapest shirts. You want to be able to have a good shirt to start with. But you can save money in the steps by being able to understand the process and using the proper settings for the way you want to print, and save time as well.
And let me just say, because we're here in the office, I hear Roy every day, and this is a discussion he has often, where he's explaining that the importance of that substrate, and you're going to spend so much more time and so much more money trying to fix you know, a lesser quality t-shirt than had you just started with a better quality t-shirt in the beginning. So
Yeah, and getting back to the ring spun versus not ring spun, you know, the looser the fibers, the more the ink will penetrate into those fibers. So that's going to cost you money as well. It's going to take more ink. So that you need to keep in mind when you're going through this whole process.
well, Roy, if there's nothing else, I think you did a fabulous job. Thank you for your time. Thank you for explaining. I mean, if a guy like me can understand it, I'm pretty sure the rest of the folks watching, tuning in, they're going to get it too. So this has been a great training session on Garment Creator and really drilling deep on light garments and all of the settings that are possible. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your experience. Anything else to close with before we say goodbye?
Just wanted to thank everybody for attending today, and be safe out there.
Perfect. And let me wrap with this. We've got, for those of you who are familiar, we usually close with some key contact info, so that if you do need to reach out, one of the things where you probably talk way more than I do to people who call in that are not clients, we would still encourage you, because we're trying to give you a kind of a get out of jail free card. If you have an F2100 and you bought it from somebody else and you're not getting this level of training and understanding, and you tuned in today, you're welcome to still call our tech support. We believe in the principle of, you know, rising tide raises all ships, and we want you to be successful with this printer. We want your business to succeed. And we don't want to hear these war stories of, oh, my printer didn't work. The reality is we have thousands of businesses that are using this printer, and the F2100 is a rock star if you are properly trained and if you do some due diligence. So give us a call. There's our tech number. Roy, I don't know.
I completely agree with what you said, Jay. Definitely call tech support. We will help anybody, even if you have a 2000. We also do training on 2000s. We have customers that pay for training, even though they've received their machine from a competitor, from us. And the way we look at it is, if we make you successful and you need a second machine, you're going to turn to us for that, as well as any other additions to your shop, whatever they may be. We also do dye sub, solvent, you know, what have you. So it depends on which way you're going in the market, and we're here to help you.
And that leads right into the two names you see at the bottom as well. We have a staff that have a tremendous amount of experience. They are not predatory salespeople. And Terry Combs and Jeff Morgenthaler, you can reach out to them. You can call the office if you'd like, that same 800 number, or you can reach them via emails too. So that'll do it for today. We're going to sign off. Thanks again, Roy.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.